A vampire CEO pretends to sleep to catch a thief. But when a tired janitor covers him with her old sweater and whispers something no one said in centuries, he realizes she isn't just kind. She's the reincarnation of the woman he lost 400 years ago. I love knowing where my listeners are, so before this story unfolds, drop your location in the comment. The city never truly slept, but Lucien Draeger hadn't slept in 400 years. From the top floor of Draeger Industries, the skyline of New York looked like a sea of broken stars, glittering lights scattered across a dark world. Lucien sat alone in his glass-walled office, a figure of perfect stillness in a black suit. The only sound was the steady tick of a clock he didn't need to hear. He didn't breathe. Not really. He mimicked the rise and fall of his chest the way an actor performs a scene. Old habits died slowly, immortality slower. Tonight, he had one purpose. Catch whoever had been stealing from his company. For 3 weeks, expensive things had vanished: a gold pen, a diamond cufflink, a limited edition watch. Tiny things, but theft was a disease. Left untreated, it spread. Lucien didn't tolerate decay in his empire. So tonight, he decided to play human, to pretend to fall asleep at his desk and see who would take the bait. He leaned back in his leather chair, unbuttoned his collar, loosened his tie. His eyes closed halfway. From the outside, he looked like a man who'd worked himself to exhaustion. In truth, he was listening to every heartbeat, every whisper, every shifting molecule of air in the vast, empty building. He didn't need sleep. He needed truth. Hours passed. The city below faded into silence. By midnight, only the night cleaning crew remained. Then came the sound. A soft click of a keycard in the door. Lucien stilled, though he was already stiller than death. His senses sharpened: the faint scent of lemon cleaner, old wood polish, and something gentler beneath it, lavender soap. A woman's scent. The door opened. Footsteps entered, light, cautious, a rhythm of someone trying not to disturb. A cleaning cart squeaked once, then hushed. The footsteps stopped about 6 feet away. He heard her breath catch. "Oh, Mr. Draeger?" The voice was soft, uncertain, young. "Sir, are you asleep?" Lucien didn't move. He kept his heartbeat slow, steady, perfectly human. He expected her to tiptoe closer and pocket something small: a pen, a gold-plated clip, maybe the silver key lying on his desk. That was how greed usually worked. But instead, he heard a soft sigh. Then a whisper, barely audible. "You work too hard." The woman moved around his desk. He could hear the gentle shuffle of her shoes, the faint swish of her cleaning cloth. She wasn't stealing. She was straightening papers, wiping the window glass, humming under her breath. Lucien's frown almost broke his act. This wasn't how people behaved when they thought they were unobserved. Humans stole, lied, took advantage. They didn't hum lullabies while cleaning offices that weren't theirs. He listened for 10 minutes, motionless. She worked quietly, carefully, even adjusted the crooked frame on his wall. She didn't approach the drawer he'd left slightly open, where several $100s sat in plain sight. Then, just as he began to think she might leave, the footsteps came closer again. He felt her presence beside him, warm, alive. Every muscle in his body tensed. If she reached for his wallet, he'd catch her wrist in an instant. But instead, something soft brushed his shoulders. A cardigan. Old. Worn. It smelled faintly of detergent and that lavender soap. Lucien almost opened his eyes, almost broke character. Then he heard her whisper. "No one deserves to be this lonely." It was like the world stopped breathing. Those words. Exactly those words. His wife, Amora Even Shade, had said them centuries ago, the night before she died. She'd found him sitting in his study, too tired to pretend to be human anymore, and had draped her shawl around his shoulders, whispering that same phrase. He hadn't heard it since. And now, a stranger, a janitor, had just repeated it, in the same tender tone. Her footsteps moved away. The door clicked shut. Silence fell again. Lucien opened his eyes. For the first time in 4 centuries, he didn't know what to think. He looked down at the cardigan resting on his shoulders. Beige. Frayed at the sleeves. A small tear near the hem. It didn't belong in this world of glass and gold, yet it felt heavier than the city itself. His fingers tightened on the fabric. His breath, the false one he kept for appearances, came uneven. He should have felt anger. Instead, he felt something far more dangerous. Hope. Ilara Monroe wiped her hands on her uniform and sighed. It was nearly 1 a.m, and her back ached from scrubbing office floors for 8 straight hours. The train ride home would take 40 minutes. Her babysitter, Mrs. Lee, would already be asleep on the couch, her son Noah curled beside her like a kitten. She'd tiptoe in, pay the woman, and fall into bed for 3 hours before waking to get Noah ready for kindergarten. That was her life, a cycle of exhaustion and small smiles. But it was better than the year before, when she'd been jobless and terrified of eviction. She pushed her cleaning cart down the hallway, humming softly. The world was quieter at night. Empty offices felt like churches, cold but peaceful. Room 5401. CEO's office. Her stomach tightened. She'd already cleaned the floor outside, but she hesitated. Mr. Drager was intimidating. She'd seen him once, from a distance, during orientation. Tall, sharp-featured, with eyes like storm clouds, the kind of man who looked at the world as though it owed him something. She'd been told to clean his office last, when everyone else was gone. "Please be empty," she whispered as she swiped her card. The light flicked on, revealing the large office, floor-to-ceiling windows, shelves full of books, and a desk big enough to land a helicopter. And there he was. Mr. Drager, asleep in his chair. Ilara froze. He looked human. Tired, even. His head was tilted slightly, one hand dangling from the armrest. For a man rumored to be ruthless, he looked heartbreakingly alone. "Oh," she murmured. "Guess even billionaires get tired." She almost backed out quietly, but then she noticed the room. His trash bin full. The windows streaked. Papers scattered like fallen leaves. Her worker's instinct kicked in. Quiet as a ghost, she began to clean. 10 minutes later, she found herself near his desk again. He hadn't moved. Not a twitch. His breathing was deep and even. Ilara hesitated. The air conditioning in this office was always freezing. And he wasn't even wearing his jacket, just a thin white shirt. She looked down at her own cardigan. Beige, old, with a coffee stain near the hem. It wasn't much, but warmth was warmth. "Oh, this is a bad idea," she muttered and gently draped it over his shoulders. For a moment, she stood there, studying him. There was a sadness in his face, even in sleep, the kind that made her chest ache. "No one deserves to be this lonely," she whispered, not realizing she'd spoken aloud. Then she turned off the light and left, her heart oddly heavy. Back in his office, Lucien stood by the window, the cardigan in his hands. The skyline reflected in the glass, cold, endless, and yet tonight it felt smaller. He lifted the fabric to his face, breathing in the faint scent. Lavender and something else, hope, maybe. He couldn't remember the last time he'd felt the urge to find someone. But now he couldn't stop himself. He pressed a button on his desk phone. "Marcus," he said. A groggy voice answered, "Sir?" "It's past midnight. The cleaning woman who just left my office. I want her full file on my desk within the hour. Every detail." "Sir, there are several night cleaners." "Her name," Lucien said sharply. "She has brown hair. She wears a beige cardigan. Or she did. Find her." He hung up before Marcus could reply. For a long time, he just stood there, fingers tracing the cardigan's frayed edge. For the first time in centuries, the immortal king of Drager Industries felt something he'd long forgotten how to spell. Curiosity. And beneath it, longing. The next day, Ilara walked into the office building, bleary-eyed but smiling faintly. Mrs. Lee had given Noah extra pancakes that morning, and he'd told her, "You're the best mom ever, even if you're sleepy." Those words kept her going. She clocked in, grabbed her cart, and noticed a man by the maintenance door, tall, wearing blue overalls and a baseball cap pulled low. He gave her a polite nod. "New guy?" she asked. He nodded. "Yeah. First week." "You? 8 months. Don't worry, it gets easier, sort of." She smiled. He smiled back, though there was something strange in his eyes, old, thoughtful, almost sad. "I'm Leo," he said. "Ilara." The name hit him like lightning. Ilara. In an ancient tongue, it meant light. Fate had a cruel sense of humor. They shook hands briefly. The moment their palms touched, Lucien felt a spark, literal, like a current running up his arm. For a heartbeat, the world blurred. He saw fire. A woman in another century, holding his hand and laughing. Her eyes, bright as the moon. Then it was gone. Ilara blinked, pulling her hand back. "Static," she said quickly. "Happens a lot with the old carpets here." "Right," he said softly, though he knew it was something far more than static. As she pushed her cart past him, she turned back once. "Hey, Leo. You look like you haven't slept in days." Lucien smiled faintly. "You could say that." "Well," she said with a shrug, "no one deserves to be that tired." She disappeared down the hall before she could see the shock in his eyes. He whispered to the empty corridor, "You keep saying that." And somewhere deep inside him, deeper than blood, deeper than memory, something ancient stirred. Lucien Draeger didn't need sleep, but he stared at the ceiling of his penthouse until sunrise, wide awake and unsettled. The beige cardigan lay across the back of a chair like an accusation. He'd replayed the security footage 23 times. Every time, the same thing happened. The janitor entered his office, cleaned with quiet care, and covered him with her cardigan. No hesitation, no fear, no greed. Just that whisper. When the elevator chimed at 9 the next morning, Marcus stepped in carrying a thin folder. "Sir, the woman's name is Ilara Monroe. 27. Widowed. One child, 5 years old. Lives in Queens. No criminal record." Lucien took the file without a word. Her photo was clipped to the front. In the grainy ID picture she was smiling, a tired but warm smile that didn't belong in a world as cold as his. He turned the page and stopped. Middle name, Even Shade. Lucien's hand tightened around the folder. Even Shade. The surname he'd buried centuries ago. The name of the woman he'd once vowed to protect. Amora Even Shade, his wife, the one he'd lost to fever and fire. He read every line again, slower this time. Parents, deceased. Occupation, night janitor, Draeger Industries. Emergency contact, none. No family left. No one to connect her to him. And yet, that name. Coincidence, he told himself. It had to be coincidence. But deep inside, something ancient whispered, nothing in eternity is coincidence. He closed the file and looked out over the city. From this height, the streets looked like thin veins pulsing with light. Even Shade, he murmured again, testing the sound. It felt like blood in his mouth. The phone rang. Marcus's voice came through the speaker. "Sir, do you want me to dismiss her? If she's making you uncomfortable." "No," Lucien said quickly. "Leave her where she is. And keep this quiet." "Of course, sir." Lucien ended the call and stared again at the photo. Ilara Monroe. Brown hair, practical ponytail, those soft tired eyes. She looks nothing like Amora, he thought. But then he remembered the way her voice had softened when she said lonely. And for a moment, it wasn't Ilara standing there in his mind, it was Amora, the woman who had once whispered, "Even kings need rest." He shoved the memory away. Centuries of self-control shouldn't unravel because of a single whisper. And yet it was. By nightfall, he'd made a decision. If fate wanted to test him, he would meet it face to face. The next night, the building's lower levels were deserted except for humming fluorescent lights and the soft sound of cleaning carts rolling over tile. Lucien wore dark blue maintenance coveralls borrowed from the supply room and a cap pulled low. His reflection in the metal door looked convincingly human, brown eyes instead of pale gray, skin slightly flushed thanks to a trick of his powers. He looked like a tired worker named Leo, not an immortal predator. He stepped into the basement, carrying a clipboard he didn't need. Rows of shelves stretched into the dim distance, stacked with paper boxes and forgotten furniture. The air smelled of dust and lemon cleaner. Then came the sound he was waiting for, wheels squeaking softly, followed by the faint humming of a tune he didn't recognize. Ilara. He turned the corner and saw her bending to replace a trash bag. Her hair had slipped loose from its tie, and a strand brushed her cheek. She looked ordinary, painfully human, and yet his pulse, the one he maintained only for disguise, stumbled. When she noticed him, she startled for half a second, then smiled. "Oh, hey. Didn't know anyone else worked this shift down here." "First week," he said. His voice came out deeper than usual. "Maintenance. Leo. Ilara." She offered her hand without hesitation. Their palms met. The contact jolted through him like lightning. For a heartbeat, the world blurred. Fire, candlelight, the smell of ink and roses, a woman's laughter echoing down marble halls. He saw her face in another life, smiling at him as she whispered, "You promised forever." Then it was gone. Ilara blinked and withdrew her hand. "Static," she said with a quick laugh. "These old carpets are murder on winter nights." Lucien nodded slowly. "Yeah. Must be that." He tried to focus on the clipboard, but her voice kept drifting through the still air like music. She hummed as she worked, a soft tune that tugged at something buried deep inside him. He finally asked, "What song is that?" She glanced over her shoulder. Oh, I don't actually know. My mom used to hum it. Guess it stuck." He smiled faintly. "It sounds familiar. Maybe you heard it in an old movie." "Maybe." She climbed a step stool to reach a box on a high shelf. The stool wobbled slightly. Lucien moved before he thought, steadying it with one hand. "Careful," he said. "Thanks." She stretched higher, fingers barely brushing the box. "Almost got it." The box slid free, heavier than she expected. Lucien caught it effortlessly with one hand. She stared. "You're stronger than you look." He forced a sheepish grin. "Gym habit. Wish I had time for that. Between 2 jobs and a 5-year-old, I'm lucky if I remember breakfast." The casual words twisted in his chest. 2 jobs. A child. A human life full of exhaustion and sacrifice, and yet she was still smiling. He set the box on a lower shelf. "What's your kid's name?" "Noah." Her eyes softened immediately, the way a mother's always did. "He's the reason I can't give up, even when I want to. Smart kid, too. Thinks superheroes are real." Lucien tilted his head. "Maybe they are." She laughed. "If you find one, send him our way. Rent's killing me." He found himself smiling back. He hadn't done that, truly smiled, in decades. A loud crack split the air. A fluorescent tube above them burst, showering sparks and glass. Instinct took over. Lucien moved faster than any human eye could follow, pulling Ilara against him and turning so the shards struck his back. Heat seared through the thin fabric of the coveralls, but he ignored it. When the noise faded, she was clutched against his chest, trembling. "You all right?" His voice came rougher than he intended. Yeah, I think so." She looked up, wide-eyed. That was close. Her gaze dropped to his arm, where the sleeve had torn open, exposing pale skin marked with faint silver scars. "What happened to you?" she whispered. He froze. Those scars, old burns left by sunlight centuries ago, weren't something he could explain. "Work accident," he said quickly. She didn't believe him, but she didn't press. Instead, she reached out, fingertips hovering an inch from the scars. "That must have hurt." "Once," he said quietly. "A long time ago." She met his eyes. "Then I'm glad it's over." For a moment, neither moved. The humming lights cast halos around her hair, and he thought she looked almost exactly as she had the night he lost her, human, warm, unafraid. He stepped back before the pull became unbearable. "I should fix that light." "Yeah," she murmured. "And I should finish my rounds." She pushed her cart toward the far corridor. Halfway down, she called over her shoulder, "Thanks, Leo. For, saving me from a shower of glass." He wanted to tell her the truth, that she'd already saved him, centuries ago, but he only said, "Anytime." When she disappeared around the corner, the basement fell silent except for the hum of dying lights. Lucien lifted his injured arm. The burn was already healing, pale skin knitting back together. But the ache inside him wasn't physical. It was the ache of recognition. He pressed his palm to the spot over his heart where her hand had hovered and whispered, you're still you. Later that night, he sat in his office again, watching the grainy footage from the basement security camera. The moment the light exploded, the screen filled with static. When the picture cleared, he saw himself shielding her, saw her hand reaching toward his arm. Even through the camera's cold lens, her gentleness radiated like warmth. He rewound, slowed the frame, studied the faint flicker of gold that had flashed in her eyes when their hands touched. Amora had eyes that turned gold in sunlight. He closed the laptop and leaned back, staring into the dark. His pulse beat once, twice, then quickened, a rhythm he hadn't felt since he was alive. He whispered the words he'd sworn he would never speak again. Amora. Outside the window, dawn crept over the skyline. He turned away before the light touched him. The next evening, Ilara caught herself thinking about the new maintenance guy far too often. There had been something strange about him, calm, polite, but with eyes that seemed to carry centuries. She told herself she was being dramatic. Lack of sleep did weird things to the brain. Still, when she tucked Noah into bed that night, she found herself humming that same old tune again. He opened one eye sleepily. "Mama, that song again?" "Yeah. Grandma used to sing it." "I like it," he murmured. "It sounds sad, though." She smoothed his hair. "Maybe it's a happy kind of sad." He smiled, drifting off. Ilara sat beside him until his breathing evened. Then she went to the window and stared out at the streetlights. Somewhere out there, a man with storm-gray eyes, no, brown eyes now, she corrected herself, was probably fixing lights and pretending not to be extraordinary. She didn't know that at that very moment, Lucien was standing on a rooftop across the city, watching the same horizon, holding a beige cardigan in his hands like a relic. The next few nights passed like a fever Lucien couldn't shake. He told himself to stay away from her, to let the strange coincidence fade. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw Ilara's face when she whispered those words, felt the weight of her cardigan on his shoulders, smelled that faint lavender and laundry scent that shouldn't still linger but did. By the fourth night, he gave up pretending. He sat in the darkened control room of Draeger Tower, surrounded by monitors showing every corridor and service level. Security feeds flickered, each a silent square of life happening beyond his reach. Then, at 11:42 p.m., Camera 47 came alive, the basement hallway. Ilara appeared, humming again. He turned up the sound. The melody was clearer this time, old, simple, like something sung around a fire centuries ago. It stopped him cold because he remembered it. Not from this life, but from another. Amora used to hum it while painting, the same 4 notes repeating like a heartbeat. He leaned forward, hand gripping the table. "It can't be," he whispered to no one. On the screen, Ilara paused, looking up as if she felt eyes on her. Lucien shut off the feed immediately, guilt twisting through him. He wasn't supposed to watch her. That wasn't what this was supposed to become. He stood, walked to the window, and stared at his reflection. The city burned beneath him, alive, sleepless, 100,000 heartbeats he could hear if he let himself. His own chest was still, silent, yet something inside pulsed like a second heartbeat that didn't belong to his body at all. He poured himself a glass of blood from a crystal decanter, synthetic, carefully rationed, and stared at it. His hunger had been quiet for years. Centuries of discipline had tamed it into silence. But since meeting Ilara, it stirred again, restless, whispering from deep inside. It wasn't her blood he wanted. It was her nearness, her warmth. The way she looked at him without fear. He clenched the glass until it cracked. Dark liquid spilled over his hand like a wound. He hated that he still could feel it, hate and hunger, both alive after so long dead. "Control yourself," he muttered. "She's human. She's..." A memory slammed into him before he could finish. A firelit room. A woman laughing. Her lips stained red with wine, not blood. And a voice, soft as rain. "You always forget, Lucien. You can't cage what you love." He dropped the glass. It shattered across the marble floor. For the first time in centuries, the immortal felt afraid, not of death, not of the hunters who'd stalked his kind since time began, but of his own heart remembering what it wasn't supposed to. Ilara couldn't shake the dreams. They came every night now, flashes of another world. She was in a castle lit by candles, writing letters with a quill. A man stood beside her, face blurred by shadow but familiar in a way that hurt to look at. His voice was deep, gentle, but full of sadness. In the dreams, he called her Amora. Each morning she woke with her hands trembling, the scent of smoke still in her hair. The first few times, she told herself it was stress. But the dreams grew sharper, the walls of the castle more vivid, the voice more desperate. One night she dreamed of fire. The castle burned. The man was screaming her name, his face blooded, his eyes glowing red through the smoke. She reached for him, but before she could touch him, everything went white. Ilara sat up in bed with a gasp. Noah whimpered in his sleep across the room. She pressed a hand over her heart, feeling it race. Just a dream, she whispered to herself. Just a dream. But when she looked at her wrist, there was soot on her skin. The next evening at work, she almost didn't recognize Lucien or Leo, as she still thought of him. He was waiting near the service elevator, leaning casually on his mop handle, smiling that faint half-smile that looked a little too practiced. "Hey," she said, startled. "You're here early." He shrugged. "Couldn't sleep. Join the club." She gestured to the mop bucket. "If insomnia paid, I'd be rich." Lucien chuckled softly. It was strange, the sound warm, human, something he hadn't remembered how to fake so naturally. "Maybe the world would be quieter if we all just slept," he said. "Not for people like us," Ilara replied. "The world's noisy even when it's silent." They worked side by side in the basement for an hour. It should have been ordinary, two tired night workers, exchanging small talk about broken vending machines and bad coffee. But every time their shoulders brushed, Lucien felt his control slipping. The air between them felt charged, alive. When she bent to reach for a trash bin, her necklace slipped from under her shirt, a small silver pendant in the shape of a crescent moon. Lucien froze. He'd seen that necklace before. He'd given it, centuries ago, to Amora on their wedding night. "Where did you get that?" he asked, his voice too sharp. She blinked, startled. "This? Oh, it was my mom's. She said it's been in our family for generations." "Why?" Lucien stared, forcing his face blank. "Just, thought I'd seen one like it." She laughed lightly. "Well, maybe you have. It's old. I probably shouldn't wear it to work, but it feels wrong not to." He nodded, but his mind was spinning. He could still remember fastening that same chain around Amora's neck, could still feel her breath against his fingers as she'd whispered, "Now you can never forget me." He'd forgotten nothing. He'd just lost her. That night, he returned to his penthouse and dug through ancient journals, hundreds of them, each filled with centuries of notes written in languages no one spoke anymore. He found one dated 1612, the year Amora had died. The moon pendant is her protection, her tether. If the bloodline holds, the mark will remain. Lucien closed the book with shaking hands. The bloodline. Her bloodline. Ilara wasn't coincidence. She was descendant. And fate, cruel and deliberate, had brought her back into his world. 2 nights later, Ilara arrived home from her diner shift at nearly midnight. The hallway light in her apartment building flickered, casting yellow shadows across the peeling walls. She was halfway to her door when something on the floor caught her eye. A small object, gleaming faintly in the dim light. She picked it up, a silver pin shaped like a bat with tiny red stones for eyes. It was beautiful, old-fashioned, heavy for its size. The details were intricate, too fine to be costume jewelry. She frowned. "Weird." "Mom." Noah's sleepy voice came from the apartment doorway. He'd been waiting up again, his toy car clutched in one hand. "What's that?" "I think someone dropped it." She turned it over. On the back was an engraving, LD. Her heart skipped. Probably someone rich. Noah grinned. "Can I keep it?" "Better not, baby. We'll turn it in to lost and found at work." He pouted. "It looks like something from those vampire shows." She smiled faintly. "Then it's definitely not for us." But later, while Noah slept, she sat at the table turning the pin over and over in her hands. LD. She thought of Leo. Of his strange eyes, his old-fashioned words, the way he'd looked at her like she was something he'd been searching for forever. Don't be ridiculous, she told herself. He's just a guy. Still, she locked the pin in her dresser drawer before going to bed. That night, the dreams returned stronger. This time, she saw everything: the fire, the blood, the betrayal. And the man with the same eyes as Leo, holding her dying body, whispering her name as his tears fell red onto her skin. Forgive me, my love. She woke sobbing. Across the city, Lucien stood on a rooftop, the night wind tugging at his coat. He'd dropped the insignia on purpose, a test. If she returned it, she was truly human. If she kept it, some part of her still remembered. He didn't expect to feel guilt watching her pick it up. From the height of the neighboring building, his vampire sight saw everything: the flick of her hair, the way she smiled faintly at her son, the tired strength in every movement. He'd watched mortals for centuries, but never one who made eternity feel small. Then a sound caught his ear. A heartbeat that wasn't hers. Heavy boots echoing from the alley below. 4 men. 2 quiet. 2 armed. Hunters. He swore under his breath. They'd found him again. And worse, they were close to her home. He melted back into shadow, disappearing across rooftops like smoke, following them from above. The hunters stopped across from Ilara's building. One held up a sensor that pulsed faintly red. He's been here, the man said. Trace is fresh. Lucien's jaw tightened. His own energy signature. They were tracking him and by extension, her. He could kill them easily. But that would draw more. The Covenant always sent replacements. Instead, he waited until they left, slipping back into the night. When he looked toward Ilara's window, he saw her silhouette standing there, staring out, uneasy. She couldn't see him. But he whispered anyway. I'm sorry. He didn't know if he was apologizing for the danger or for dragging her into his cursed orbit again. The next day, Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. Even at work, the sense clung to her: eyes behind glass, shadows that moved when she wasn't looking. She caught herself humming again to stay calm. Rough night, a voice said behind her. She turned. Leo, no, Lucien, though she didn't yet know it, stood in the hallway, holding a clipboard. You look pale, he said softly. I just didn't sleep much. She tried to smile. Nightmares. About what? She hesitated. Someone I don't know, but feels familiar. He keeps saying my name like he's afraid I'll forget him. Lucien's throat tightened. And do you? I wake up before I can answer. He studied her a long moment, then said quietly, maybe you already did once. She frowned, unsure how to take that. You say weird things sometimes, you know that? He smiled faintly. I've had a long life to practice. Ilara laughed, a small, uncertain sound, and pushed her cart past him. As she did, her pendant brushed against his hand. For a second, both froze. The air between them felt charged again, like the moment before lightning strikes. He wanted to tell her everything: who he was, who she had been, what they had lost. But telling her would mean exposing her to his world, the one filled with blood and fire and endless regret. Instead, he said, be careful tonight. The city feels restless. She turned, eyebrows raised. Restless? You ever feel like something's about to change? His voice was quiet, almost reverent. Like the world's holding its breath. Ilara smiled faintly. Every night. When she walked away, Lucien stood alone in the hall, her words echoing through him. Every night. Yes, he thought. So do I. That evening, as rain began to fall, he sat once again by his office window, the cardigan folded neatly beside him. The city's lights blurred through the water on the glass. He'd spent centuries trying to bury the past. But now the past wore a janitor's uniform, smiled through exhaustion, and called herself Ilara. He didn't know what frightened him more, that she might never remember, or that she already was. And somewhere below, in a small apartment in Queens, Ilara dreamed again, this time not of fire, but of a promise whispered beneath the stars. If death takes you from me once, I'll find you again in every lifetime. 3 days passed before Lucien dared to see her again. He spent the time fighting himself, one part wanting to erase her memory and end this dangerous cycle, another part unable to stay away. Each night, His hunger stirred like a storm beneath calm water. But it wasn't just thirst anymore. It was longing, ancient, relentless, and terrifying. The hunters were moving closer. He could feel it in the energy of the city, the subtle shift in the air that always came before a hunt. He needed to draw them off her trail, make them think she was nothing more than another human he'd brushed past. But to do that, he had to know how much she remembered. He stared at the beige cardigan draped across the back of his chair. The thought came like lightning, reckless but inevitable. He would invite her to dinner. Not as Leo, the maintenance worker. As Lucien Draeger, her boss. If she saw him clearly, the man he really was, maybe it would jog the fragments of memory she carried, and he could control what followed. He picked up his phone. "Marcus," he said. "Arrange a staff appreciation dinner. Send invitations to all night shift employees, but ensure only one reaches Ilara Monroe." "Yes, sir." "Venue?" "My home." There was a pause. "Your home, sir?" "You heard me." When he ended the call, Lucien caught sight of his reflection in the glass. He hadn't hosted a dinner in 100 years. The last time he'd set a table, it had been for Amora, the night before the fever took her life. He pressed his palms to the cool surface of the window. "Let's see if the universe still remembers mercy," he whispered. The invitation arrived at Ilara's apartment on Thursday afternoon. It was printed on cream paper that felt like silk, sealed with gold lettering. "Lucien Draeger, CEO of Draeger Industries, invites you to a private staff appreciation dinner. Saturday, 8 p.m., transportation provided." Ilara frowned at the elegant script. "That can't be right," she murmured. "He doesn't even know who I am." Noah looked up from his coloring book. "Is it fancy?" "Probably too fancy for us," she said with a small laugh. But when she called the number printed at the bottom, the voice that answered made her heart stutter. "Miss Monroe," said Lucien's smooth, even tone. "I'm glad you received the invitation." "Mr. Draeger?" She blinked in disbelief. "I am, yes, but are you sure?" "I'm just part of the night staff." "You work while the rest of us sleep," he said simply. "That deserves recognition. I insist you come." Ilara hesitated. "I don't have anyone to watch my son." "Bring him," Lucien said without pause. "There will be someone to look after him. He'll be safe." There was something in the way he said it, not command, not suggestion, but certainty. The kind that left no room for doubt. "All right," she said finally. "If you're sure." "I'm sure," Lucien replied softly. "See you Saturday, Miss Monroe." When the call ended, she stared at her phone for a long moment. She should have been suspicious. She should have said no. But some invisible thread pulled her toward yes. She didn't know why, only that she couldn't stop thinking about his voice. Saturday came too quickly. A sleek black car arrived outside their apartment just after 7. Noah pressed his nose to the window, wide-eyed at the gleaming Mercedes. "Are we rich now?" he asked. "Not yet," Ilara said, adjusting the borrowed black dress Mrs. Lee had lent her. "Don't touch anything in that car, okay? It probably costs more than our building." The drive took them out of the city, past the noise and smog, into quiet hills where old mansions slept behind iron gates. When the car finally turned down a tree-lined road, Ilara's breath caught. The house, no, the mansion, looked like something out of another century. Stone walls covered in ivy, tall windows glowing with candlelight, and at the center of the drive, a fountain carved into the shape of a winged creature. Its eyes, like tiny rubies, gleamed in the dusk. "Mama," Noah whispered, "this looks like a castle." "It does," she murmured. "Maybe we're in the wrong story." The driver opened the door. A butler in black stood waiting at the entrance. "Miss Monroe, Master Noah," he said with a slight bow. "Mr. Draeger is expecting you." Inside, the house smelled faintly of cedar and rain. The ceilings arched high, chandeliers flickering with real flames instead of bulbs. Every wall held paintings, faces from another time, dressed in velvet and lace, eyes following her wherever she moved. Ilara's stomach tightened. "Where's everyone else?" she asked. "You're the first to arrive," the butler replied smoothly. "Mr. Draeger is waiting in the dining room." She nodded slowly. "Right. Of course." She took Noah's hand, But before they reached the end of the long hallway, another servant appeared and guided the boy toward a smaller room. "There's a playroom prepared for Master Noah," the man said. "Games, food, a caretaker." Noah looked up at her uncertainly. She knelt, kissing his forehead. "It's okay, baby. I'll be right nearby." He smiled and let himself be led away. Ilara took a deep breath, smoothed her dress, and pushed open the heavy double doors ahead. What she saw made her stop short. The dining room was set for two. And at the head of the table, dressed in a black suit that made him look carved from shadow, sat Lucian Drager. Lucian rose when she entered. The candlelight flickered across his face, highlighting the sharp planes of his jaw, the stillness of his eyes, too calm, too ancient. "Miss Monroe," he said softly. "Thank you for coming." Ilara blinked. "Where's everyone else?" A brief pause. "There is no one else," he admitted. "This dinner is for you. For me." She tried to laugh, but it came out thin. "That's a lot of effort for a janitor. For a woman who covers strangers with her cardigan," he said, "it's not enough." Her throat went dry. "You saw that. I see everything that happens in this building." His tone gentled. But that moment, that was different. She didn't know what to say, so she sat down. The room was eerily quiet except for the soft crackle of candle wicks. Outside, the moon had begun to rise, full and red, heavy in the sky like a wound. The servants appeared briefly to serve the first course, delicate food she didn't recognize, then disappeared again, leaving them alone. Lucian poured her wine. She stared at the glass but didn't drink. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "I don't need." "I did," he interrupted. "Because you deserve to know why I can't stop thinking about you." Her breath caught. "What are you talking about?" He leaned back slightly, studying her. "Do you believe in fate, Ilara?" She hesitated. "I believe in bad luck." A small smile touched his mouth. "Maybe they're the same thing." He reached into his pocket and placed something on the table between them, the silver bat pin. Her eyes widened. "How? That was outside my apartment." "I dropped it," he said simply. "I wanted to see if you'd keep it." Her voice sharpened. "You were at my building?" He met her gaze. "Yes." "Why?" Lucian's control slipped for just a moment. "Because I needed to know if you were real." The words hung between them, heavy as thunder. Ilara's heart thudded. "Mr. Drager, I think I should." Then the lights went out. Every chandelier, every candle, gone. The room plunged into darkness, lit only by the faint red glow filtering through the window. She turned toward it, heart hammering. The moon had turned blood red. "Power outage," she whispered. Lucian's voice was low, rough, trembling. "No." When he stood, the movement was wrong, too smooth, too fast. She backed away instinctively. The moonlight fell across his face, and for the first time she saw it, the truth. His eyes were burning red. His teeth had lengthened, catching the light like blades. Ilara froze. What are you?" He closed his eyes, turning away. "A monster," he said softly. "One who spent centuries pretending not to be." The candles flared back to life on their own, flames leaping high as if in answer to his words. She stumbled backward, her chair toppling. "This is insane." This." "Ilara," he said, stepping closer. "Please. I won't hurt you." "How do you know my name?" "Because I knew it before you were born." His voice broke on the last word. "Because I've spoken it across lifetimes." She shook her head, tears burning her eyes. "Stop." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small locket, tarnished silver, shaped like a crescent moon. "This was yours," he whispered. "Once." Her hand went to her throat instinctively, to the necklace she always wore. The same crescent moon. She stared at him. "How do you?" "Because I gave it to you," he said. "The night before you died." Ilara's breath caught. The air in the room seemed to thin. Images crashed through her mind, fire, screams, his voice calling her name. Her knees gave way. Lucian caught her before she fell. When she looked up, his eyes were human again, grey and full of sorrow. "You remember," he whispered. "I don't," her voice trembled. "I don't understand." "Yes, You do. You've seen me in your dreams. You called me by my real name. Lucian, she breathed. He closed his eyes, pain flickering across his face. Say it again. Lucian. For a heartbeat, time stopped. The candle flames bent toward her, as if drawn to her breath. The room pulsed with something alive, ancient energy stirring awake. Then the front doors slammed open downstairs. A gust of cold wind swept through the hall, snuffing out half the candles. Lucian's head snapped toward the sound. They're here. Who? Hunters, he said, voice low and deadly. They found me. Ilara clutched his arm. Then we have to run. He shook his head. They won't stop until one of us is dead. Then fight them. He looked down at her, the same woman he'd lost centuries ago, and for a moment, he almost smiled. You always said that. Before she could reply, a crash shattered the windows. A blinding flare of white light filled the room. Lucian threw himself in front of her, snarling, his fangs flashing. The air smelled of burning flesh and silver. Ilara screamed, but he didn't move, didn't stop shielding her even as the light tore at his skin. When it finally dimmed, he was on his knees, smoke rising from his arms. She dropped beside him, trembling. Lucian, no. He looked up at her, his voice barely audible. You have to leave. I'm not leaving you. He tried to speak again, but his strength was gone. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was her face, terrified, defiant, and heartbreakingly familiar. Amora, he thought as the world faded. You found me again. Outside, the blood moon hung over the mansion like an open wound. Inside, Ilara knelt beside the immortal who had once loved her enough to die. And for the first time in her life, she realized that some nightmares weren't dreams at all, they were memories waiting to wake. Ilara flees the burning mansion carrying Noah. That night, she dreams in full for the first time. She is Amora centuries ago, a scholar's daughter who fell in love with Lucian Draeger, the immortal lord of her city. In the dream she remembers how she died protecting him from hunters, how she whispered "Find me again." When she wakes, she looks through old archives online. To her horror she finds an actual record. Amora Even Shade, wife of Lucian Draeger, died 1612. Her hands shake as the dream and history overlap. Across town Lucian wakes in his ruined house. His burns are healing but his heart aches. The blood moon has faded, leaving the mansion in ruins and the hunters scattered. He knows Ilara remembers now, he felt the bond reignite when she said his name. He leaves the mansion before dawn, hiding from the coming sunlight and from the guilt that he has brought danger to her again. Ilara spends the day half in a daze, half in panic. The world looks the same but nothing feels real. She goes to work only to find the office floor sealed off, police tape across the lobby. News reports call it a gas explosion at Draeger Industries. No deaths reported. The name Lucian Draeger is missing from every report. It's as if he never existed. That night she finds him waiting in the shadows near her apartment. He looks human again, paler, weary, but alive. You should hate me, he says. I don't know what to feel, she answers. Then let me explain. He tells her everything, his curse, his endless years, the vow that if she ever returned in another life, he would find her but never force her to remember. His voice breaks when he admits that this time he failed, his presence has already drawn hunters close. Ilara listens in silence. If we keep running, she says at last, we'll never stop. They'll come for me at sunrise, he warns. Then we stop running before that. Before dawn they take shelter at Draeger Tower, 45 stories up. Lucian locks the roof access and watches the horizon turn grey. His strength is fading, daylight is poison to him, but he refuses to leave. They track by scent, he tells her. If they reach you, they'll reach us, she interrupts. You're not alone this time. Below, the hunters breach the building. The elevator lights die one by one as they climb. Lucian readies himself, eyes bright again with the crimson flare of battle. Ilara grabs a wrench from the maintenance box. She has no weapon but courage. When the doors burst open, white-armored hunters pour onto the roof, carrying guns that glow with ultraviolet light. The leader raises a flare grenade. Lucian Draeger, she says through a mask, you've broken Covenant law. Lucien steps forward. I've broken nothing but my own curse. The grenade ignites a sphere of artificial sunlight. Lucien lunges, wrapping himself around Elara as the light explodes. His skin burns. The smell of smoke fills the air. Elara cries out and throws her cardigan, the same old beige one, over his shoulders, shielding as much as she can. She whispers the same words she once spoke centuries ago. No one deserves to be this tired. Something changes in that instant. The flare dims. The hunters freeze as Lucien's eyes flood with tears, red, shimmering, glowing like rubies. Blood tears. The rare mark of a soul bound beyond death. The lead hunter lowers her weapon. Stand down, she orders quietly. He's changed. Lucien collapses. Elara kneels beside him, covering his burns with shaking hands. The hunters retreat without another word, leaving the two of them in the fading glow of dawn. As the first real sunlight spills over the city, Lucien doesn't burn. His skin only warms. He stares at the light in disbelief, then at her. I think, he says hoarsely, you freed me. Elara smiles through tears. Maybe you were never cursed. Maybe you were just waiting to rest. They sit together as the sun climbs higher, the skyline turning gold around them. For the first time in 4 centuries, Lucien Draeger closes his eyes not to hide from the light, but to feel it. And when he opens them again, the world is bright and alive. Lucien and Elara leave the rooftop as the city wakes below them. For the first time in centuries, he walks in daylight without pain. Every color looks new. The sky isn't gray but deep blue, the clouds edged in gold. His reflection in a window shows no fangs, no blood-red eyes, just a man who finally looks mortal. Elara keeps close beside him. The tower still smells of smoke and silver dust from the hunters' weapons, but the silence feels like peace. You're really free, she asks. I think so, he says, touching the sunlight on his hand. It doesn't burn. It feels warm. They take a train out of the city to hide until nightfall. Lucien wears an old coat, hair damp from rain, trying to blend in. Passengers glance at them but see only a tired couple. Elara watches his reflection in the window. He looks younger already, the hardness in his face easing. I don't know what happens next, she admits. We live, he answers simply. That's new enough. When the train slows at a coastal town, he smiles faintly. This will do. The place is quiet, full of fishing boats and gulls. They rent a small cottage by the shore with the last of her savings. That evening, Lucien stands on the sand barefoot, letting the waves touch his feet. He laughs softly at the shock of cold water. Do you know, he says, I forgot what this felt like. You'll remember everything again, she tells him. Maybe I'll learn instead. At sunset, Noah runs down the beach, chasing gulls. He doesn't know the details of what happened. Elara only said that Mr. Draeger helped them move somewhere safer, but he adores the man instantly. Lucien builds him a small sand castle, explaining how to make towers that won't fall. Watching them, Elara feels something gentle settle inside her, like the tide turning. For a week the peace holds. Lucien sleeps each night, dreaming for the first time in centuries. He dreams of ordinary things, bread baking, laughter, a child's voice calling him dad. But peace never lasts forever. One grey morning he senses movement beyond the cliffs. Hunters again, too this time, following a trail of energy his curse used to leave behind. He doesn't tell Elara. Instead, he spends the day walking with her through the market, memorizing every color of her smile. That night the storm breaks. Thunder shakes the cottage, rain hammering the roof. Lucien goes outside, waiting by the path that leads from the cliffs. 2 figures appear through the rain, hooded, weapons hidden beneath coats. You should have burned with the rest, one calls. I'm not what I was, Lucien answers. There's no cure for what you are. He could run, but he stands his ground. Lightning flashes. In that instant he sees their faces, young, frightened, trying to look brave. Go home, he says quietly. There's nothing left to hunt. They raise their weapons anyway. The flash of light comes, but when it fades Lucien is still standing. The silver bolts lie harmlessly in the mud. The hunters stare, realizing the truth. Sunlight, silver, holy symbols, none of it touches him now. Ilara runs from the cottage, shouting his name. Noah follows, clutching his small flashlight. She reaches Lucien's side just as the younger hunter drops his weapon. "What are you?" the man whispers. Lucien looks at Ilara, then back. "Alive," he says. That's all. The hunters retreat without another word. When the sound of their boots fades, the storm quiets. Rain turns soft, almost gentle. Ilara takes his hand. "It's over." "Yes," he murmurs. "But I don't know what I'm supposed to be now." She smiles. "Human. Start there." They walk back to the cottage. Inside, Noah is asleep on the couch, the cardigan folded beside him. Lucien picks it up and drapes it over Ilara's shoulders like she once did for him. "No one deserves to be this tired," he says, echoing her words. She laughs, tears bright in her eyes. Outside, dawn breaks over the sea. Lucien steps into the sunlight fully, eyes open, skin glowing with the warmth he once feared. The centuries of hunger and guilt fall away like ash. He turns to Ilara and Noah standing in the doorway and says quietly, "Home." For the first time in 400 years, the word feels real. A year passes. The sea town grows familiar, the gulls' cries at dawn, the smell of salt and coffee from their small cafe, the way the horizon glows pink before sunrise. Lucien and Ilara run the place together. Noah calls it the Dawn House, because, he says, that's when everything feels possible. Lucien learns ordinary life slowly. He burns bread, miscounts change, and still moves too quietly for human comfort. Yet he laughs more. He learns to cook, to drive, to stay up late telling Noah bedtime stories. He starts sketching again, portraits of faces he once knew but doesn't mourn anymore. Ilara watches him change. The cold that once clung to him is gone. He breathes now, truly breathes. Sometimes, at night, she sees him standing by the window, bathed in moonlight, eyes calm instead of haunted. "You're thinking again," she teases one evening. He smiles. "I'm learning how to miss the past without wanting it back." That becomes their rhythm: work, laughter, sleep, small miracles that feel larger than immortality ever did. On the anniversary of the night they met, Lucien walks to the beach at dusk. The tide is low, the sand cool beneath his feet. Ilara follows, cardigan wrapped around her shoulders. "Do you ever wish it hadn't happened?" she asks quietly. "All the centuries, the blood, the loss." He looks out at the water. "If it hadn't, I wouldn't have found you again." She steps closer. "And if we hadn't met this time? Then I'd still be looking," he says simply. A long silence passes, broken only by the surf. Then he takes a small box from his pocket. Inside lies the crescent moon pendant, cleaned, restored, gleaming silver. "You kept this," she murmurs. "It was the one promise I never broke." He fastens it around her neck again, the same way he had centuries ago, but this time under a living sky instead of candlelight. "No vows," he says. "No curses. Just today." She smiles. "And tomorrow." They walk home as the first stars appear. Noah is waiting on the porch, holding 2 mugs of hot chocolate. Lucien takes one, tasting sweetness instead of iron for the first time in his life. Later, when the house is quiet, Ilara lies beside him listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. He falls asleep, deep, peaceful, utterly human. Outside, the sea rolls and whispers against the shore. The moonlight spills across the water like silver ink, writing a new story where the old one finally ends. Not with fire, or blood, or eternity, but with warmth, laughter, and rest. If this story stirred something in you, don't let it fade with the credits. Tap subscribe and join me as we dive into the next chapter of love, loss, and impossible destinies. Because in every ending, there's always another beginning.